We've made it to another new play day on Shakesyear. Huzzah! We are going to start in on the troublesome reign of King John, which was most likely written by George Peele and most likely written 6 or 7 years before Shakespeare wrote his version of King John. When the Troublesome Reign was first published, it was published as a quarto and, fine, whatever. On its second publishing, it attributed the authorship to W.S., and on its third, it was attributed to W. Shakespeare. So that might have just been somebody wanting to take advantage of the fact that by that point, Shakespeare had written this other King John play, and maybe they were trying to get people to buy copies of this play thinking that they were the Shakespeare play, sort of a bait and switch thing. But there's a lot of people that say that this was most likely written by George Peele. It was probably not written by Shakespeare himself. Though there is the small chance that this was like a rough draft. Or at the very least, if it was written by somebody else, this might have been sort of the inspiration for King John, because there's loads of similarities between the two plays. I mean, the story is going to be very similar because King John, certain things happened in his reign that people would want to write a play about, and that's not really going to change very much. So yeah, this might have been source material for Shakespeare's King John. This might have been a rough draft that he wrote that then got attributed to somebody else. This might have been somebody just trying to capitalize on his name once Shakespeare's play did better. But whatever it is, we are going to dig in and we are going to hear from Robert Faulconbridge today in Act 1, Scene 1. So kicking off the scene, we are at court and we've got King John and Queen Eleanor, who is John's mother. We have William Marshal and the Earls of Pembroke, Essex, and Salisbury, and they all come in, and Eleanor addresses all of them saying that it's very sad that Richard the Lionheart has died, but yay, she has another son who's also going to be a great king, John, da 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 da. And John says his thanks, and then he says to Pembroke and Salisbury, he's like, bring in Chatillon, who's come here from France, because he has some things to say to me. So they leave, and while they're out of the room, Eleanor turns to John and she's like, I bet this has something to do with Constance and her son Arthur. Like, just wait, this is a thing. And it does have something to do with that exactly. And what it has to do with is Arthur actually has a better claim on the throne than King John does, because Arthur was the son of Geoffrey, so the lines of succession should have gone that way instead of skipping over to John at this point. But Constance has gone to France and gotten the King of France on her side. So when Chatillon comes in and he, gives the proper niceties and everything, he's like, my message to you from the King of France, Philip the King of France, is Arthur is here with me and he has a better claim on the throne. So please surrender your crown and your titles and your lands and give them to Arthur, who's the rightful King of England. And of course, John's not going to do that. So he gives his answer, no, and Eleanor backs him up and says, no, you're crazy. So Chatillon is going to go back to France and give the message to King Philip that the choice is war as opposed to abdication. And John tells Pembroke to escort him back, but don't escort him back too quickly, because John wants to muster his own army and get his army to France before the message gets to King Philip that war is the choice. So Chatillon and Pembroke leave, and then the sheriff, Thomas Nittigate, comes in with Philip and Robert Faulconbridge and their mother, Lady Faulconbridge, saying that these two men were rioting in the streets, and while they were rioting, they asked to speak to the king. They need to get something in front of the king himself. And the king is like, okay, fine, what's going on here? And Philip says that he has been wronged, and that was the source of the fighting. And Robert jumps right in and says, then, by my prince's leave, shall Robert speak, and tell your majesty what right I have to offer wrong as he accounteth wrong. My father, not unknown unto your grace, received his spurs of knighthood in the field at Kingly Richard's hands in Palestine, whenas the walls of Aeon gave him way. His name, Sir Robert Faulconbridge of Montbury. What by succession from his ancestors, and warlike service under England's arms, his living did amount to, at his death, 2,000 marks revenue every year. And this, my lord, I challenge for my right as lawful heir to Robert Faulconbridge. So we have another claim to succession, and who gets the money, who gets the inheritance. That's what's happening here. So Robert is saying, he's like, if it's okay for me to speak, I would like to tell your majesty why I have wronged my brother, if you can even call it a wrong. He's like, our dad, my dad anyway, was Sir Robert Faulconbridge, who fought alongside Richard the Lionheart, your brother. So he did really well, and he was a knight, and because of everything that he did for the country and because of other inheritances, he was receiving 2,000 marks every year. And since my father is now dead, I should now get that money. So then Philip pipes up and he's like, yeah, but the rights of succession say that the eldest son gets the inheritance, so I should get the inheritance. And John is like, wait a second, Philip, you're older, but Robert, you say that you're the heir. How exactly does that work? And Robert is like, well, Philip is a bastard, which we'll get to in a second, but his character is called Bastard throughout the play, maybe to help differentiate him from the King of France, who is also named Philip. So we have Philip, the King of France, and we have Philip Faulconbridge, the Bastard, as he is called in this play. But Robert says, like, they brought their mother along to corroborate that Philip is an illegitimate child, and therefore Robert should get the inheritance. And Eleanor turns to Robert and she's like, you shouldn't be so cruel to your mother. And Lady Faulconbridge falls on her knees and she appeals to Eleanor. She's like, please let me leave because this whole conversation is hurting my heart. And John is like, no, we're going to hear this out. So the bastard asks that the king call Robert insane for slandering the reputation of Sir Robert Faulconbridge, the father in this whole thing. And Robert's like, I'm not crazy. I have every right to make this claim. And Eleanor is like, you better have proof to back up your claims. And Robert is going to share his proof in the form of a monologue, which we will hear tomorrow. So far we're off to a very similar start to Shakespeare's play. Queen Eleanor has a slightly larger role in this one and gets to be maybe a little bit more snarky than she is in Shakespeare's, but Chatillon coming and saying that Arthur is claiming the throne under the protection of the King of France, and then this tiff between the Faulconbridge brothers. Both of those exist in Shakespeare's King John as well. So yeah, we'll see how it goes from here and how similar the two plays stay and what's different. And then by the end of this, you'll be able to decide, was Peele's version better or was Shakespeare's version better? Anyway, come on back tomorrow and we'll find out why Robert says his brother is illegitimate. I'll see you then. Mwah.